So I'm back. I said I might do another review, and here we go. What am I doing this time? This time it is the much complained about, often crapped on Jem and the Holograms. Okay, the first thing I'm going to say is I'm a big fan of the cartoon. A lot of people have questioned why. I'm a big fan of the cartoon, mainly because I like 80s cartoons anyway. There's a lot of good stuff from there: GI Joe, Transformers, Thundercats, He-Man, a lot of good stuff. Ghostbusters, Visionaries, Cops. There's a lot of good stuff from there anyway. But that being said, I grew up in a household with me and my younger sister. Now that I watched a lot of those cartoons. I watched a lot of those cartoons and there wasn't a hell of a lot for girls back then in terms of cartoons, or girl-oriented cartoons. There was like the Smurfs, the Snorks, things like that, and of course the aforementioned Gem and the Holograms. So because I watched quite a bit of my cartoons, quid pro quo, I had to watch some cartoons my sister would like as well. That being said, I watched Gem and the Holograms kind of begrudgingly. It was like, okay, who cares? But in watching that, I'm glad I did watch it because I ended up finding out it was a pretty good cartoon. Yes, it was more oriented towards girls, but by the same token, the stories were kind of interesting, the characters were fun, and it certainly had that sort of 80s vibe, mainly probably because it was produced by the same people that did Transformers and G.I. Joe as well, and actually is remotely connected to that universe in of the fact that the reporter character, Hector Ramirez, does appear in all three of those shows. So it's remotely connected. But that being said, I did watch the show and I did start to enjoy it. As a matter of fact, I enjoyed it more than my sister did, who eventually just stopped watching it, and I continued watching it. Throughout the years, I've enjoyed it. It's been on again on a couple different channels. I've also bought the DVDs. So certainly, I would consider myself a big fan. I buy the comic books as well. The comic books are different, but still acceptable in terms of what works for the series. A nice modern updating of the product. When this film came out, there was a lot of already backlash coming out before it even hit theaters. The budget was a piece of shit. They really were given almost no money to make this film. Director John Chu was chosen to direct it. And I got nothing against John. He's done musical movies before, and he certainly did a fair movie in G.I. Joe Retaliation, probably better than the first film, G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra. So I got nothing against him. And I certainly see where he was going with what he was doing with this film. But before it even hit theaters, it already was starting to get people, fans of the original series, pissed off and annoyed by what they were seeing, what they heard coming from it. And it died a quick death at the theaters. It was and don't hold me to this. I've heard this somewhere on the internet. It's one of the very few films in the world that has been not even in theaters for its planned initial run. It was pulled before the initial run was supposed to be ended. That's how badly it did. That being said, I actually do like the film. The problem with the film is while it's not a bad movie, it's actually a pretty good film and a pretty good story. What it is, however, is a bad adaptation of Gem and the Holograms. You could have taken this movie as is and called it anything else, removed any content of Gem, the name Holograms. You could have taken the character names and just called them Stacy, Gwen, Melissa, and Mandy, and it wouldn't have made a difference. And that's part of the problem here. The script for this film feels like it was something that may have been floating around for a while. And I don't think that's the case, but that's the way it feels. I think it's an original script, but it feels like it would be any movie that would be made post-High School Musical. Now, the High School Musical films obviously were their own films, and, we kind of are in that society where America's Got Talent, is kind of thing, and American Idol, things of that nature. And I think this script was written with a lot of that in it, a lot of the thought that today's stars are made famous through reality television, through internet, viral videos, things of that nature as well. And I kind of get that. I kind of get and understand that. And it basically tells the story of the girls who hit it big on the internet with a YouTube video. And, of course, it's kind of a very standard sort of, they get big, the record company comes in, kind of forces a wedge between them, the star and the band. And, you have to choose between what's right and what will pay the bills. Because there's also a backstory of a house being lost and things of that nature as well. Their aunt's house. That being said, if they hadn't named this film anything else or called it anything else, like Make It Big or Make It or Break It or In for the Money or anything else, or Music Sensation, anything like that, it probably would have done fair box office. It probably would have. Probably would have been given a lot more leniency towards the film in terms of critics and stuff like that. Calling it Jem and The Holograms feels a little more like they took the Hannah Montana concept, ripped it off, whitewashed it, and just slapped the Jem and The Holograms label on it. That being said, the story is not horrible. It's them, like I said, finding their way in the treacherous music business. Also them finding the Synergy robot. More on that later. There's a little robot, obviously, clearly something done to get around budgetary constraints and done to possibly give the people something fun to like, something cute to like. He looks a little like it looks a little like Eve from the WALL-E video, or from the WALL-E movie. At any rate, there are holograms per se, as Synergy, the little Synergy robot, does project holograms, holographic maps, videos, things like that nature. And essentially, of course, the story is that they need to take back who they really are, as opposed to getting caught up in this shark-infested waters of stardom from Erica Benton, as opposed to Erica Raymond, as opposed to Eric Raymond from the original cartoon series, who's the evil music executive, who tempts Jem with a solo contract to save her aunt's house. So that being said, they have to go through this and overcome this, and the message of the movie is essentially, and they spliced in a lot of internet clips of people making music on different things or being themselves, or what Jem meant to them as well. And I guess they were trying to be very creative, and in some respects, it is. It is fairly creative. I don't think I've ever seen another movie that actually used actual YouTube videos as part of the film itself. It also does stuff like putting pins in a map whenever they travel. Obviously, clearly they were trying to make it very accessible towards today's generation. That being said, like I said, it's not a bad film. It's actually a pretty good story about being yourself and not giving in to the temptations of taking the easy, quick path. Okay? And if you watch it as a film like that, it's not bad. It's actually pretty good. It's no worse than any other movie about the evils of the music business or the temptations of power. The girls are pretty good. The music is actually pretty good. The story isn't bad. The problem with this film comes down to one simple thing. It almost misses its own message. And the message is it's okay to be yourself. Jem and the Holograms is, for all intents and purposes, a ridiculous, over-the-top, cheesy 80s cartoon. That doesn't make it bad, but that's what it is. What made it so special was that it clearly took things that were big in the 80s, concepts and ideas that were were kind of still forming in terms of how things would work. And it gave it to us in a musical format, and they did it really well. I mean, when I say it's a cheesy cartoon, maybe I'm being a little over ridiculous in it. I think to the general viewer, I think it was groundbreaking in a lot of ways, because it was essentially a cartoon that produced, I can't even tell you how many hits, or not hit songs, obviously, but it produced 2 songs an episode at least that were just very catchy, very interesting songs, and they wrapped it around this intense wave of these 4 girls and the loss of their father and stepfather, and then him providing a machine that could produce holograms that became a disguise for Jerrica Benton to go out into the music world and produce this. And they also worked well in that concept of there was a duality between Jerrica Benton and between Jem, and in the love triangle, the odd love triangle between herself as Jem and Rio. And then eventually, of course, they brought in other characters as well. But the film obviously never addresses any of that. And of course, they had the rivalry between Jem and the Holograms and the Misfits, Eric Raymond and Misfits Music and Starlight Music and the Starlight Mansion and the Starlight Girls. These characters were not just rock stars. They were people, and in a lot of ways, they were people with responsibilities too, and they showed that in a lot of different things. Their responsibilities to each other as humans, as sisters, as foster guardians to homeless children, homeless girls. So keeping the lights on at the Starlight Foundation for homeless girls was something that was important and often played into a lot of the storylines. And in a way, they kind of do that with trying to keep the lights on at home and trying to keep it at home. Me personally, one of the things I found about this is I found it to be a little strange is, to me, the women of Jem were women. They were business women. They were grown-ups. These girls were like teenagers, and it just felt a little strange. And I think they lost some of what made that special is these women who were smart and sexy, and yes, I call the cartoon sexy. Shut the fuck up. But they were smart, they were sexy, they were talented, they were responsible to each other, to others. They wanted to be good characters. And while these characters want to be good characters, their only real responsibility is towards each other and towards themselves. And that kind of loses some translation for me. The film does not have holograms in the sense that Jem itself is a hologram. It's essentially the main actress, dressing up in a wig and some makeup. And it felt really cheap. I'm sorry. I know they did whatever they could to make this movie work within the budget constraints. But the fact that they had to go that route was really bad. It really took anything away that made it special. And I think the other thing, too, that they took away, which, again, didn't make it special, again, took away some of the specialness, is some of the best parts of the original cartoon series was the fact that we had this rival band, the Misfits, and they were such just prissy bitches who basically were all the exact opposite of everything Jem and the Holograms were. They were for themselves. They only had interest in making themselves more famous, making more money, making more headlines. They were the exact opposite of everything Jem and the Holograms are in the cartoon and in the movie too. And the Misfits, spoiler again, but I don't care. The movie's an older, so on. If you're being spoiled by this, tough shit. The Misfits are completely absent from the movie. They're not even a thought. They do show up at the very end of in a post-credit scene or mid-credit scene, where after the Jem and the Holograms and Rio have defeated the evil Jerrica Benton and taken over Jerrica Benton. I keep calling her that. The evil Erica Raymond and taken over Starlight Music. She goes to the Misfits, and it's a setup for an obvious sequel. And I get it. I mean, the thought is there were such high hopes that they could pull this off as an origin story, and that would be the setup for the next movie. I get it, but theoretically, when you stop and think about a film like Gem and the Holograms, you pretty much were only going to get you get one shot at making a first impression, and you kind of gotta give it everything that made it work. It would be the it would be the essence of having had the G.I. Joe movie and not having had Cobra in it. The entire story is simply about how the unit was formed. Interesting story, perhaps, but why would you not have such a strong villain and the main villain of the series in it? Or any other series as well. I mean, you think about it. Transformers, there's no Decepticons in it at all. We're just going to go with how the Autobots came to be. Don't worry about Decepticons will be in the next film, if there is a next film. Which in Gem and the Holograms case, I don't think there will be a next film. I mean, don't get me wrong. Anything is always possible. There's always the chance that at some point in time they will get the idea to reboot it and do it better, give it a little more money, do it the proper way. But I don't think it's going to happen. This movie performed so poorly and was so panned by critics and fans alone that I think it's dead. I think it's a dead franchise at this point. I mean, don't get me wrong. Who knows what the future brings? Maybe it'll come back at some point in time. But I think this film probably killed any chance of Gem and the Holograms returning as a sequel, even direct to DVD. I really do. And I think that's where the problem basically lies in, is the film lost track of what it was saying in itself. It wants to bring across the message, and it does that fabulously. It does that amazingly. It actually is a very positive film and a very positive message of be yourself. Don't be afraid to be yourself. And I think it does that very well. But in saying that, it also forgot to pay attention to that as well. And everything we loved about what Gem and the Holograms was lost. They gave us a washed out, watered down version of Gem and the Holograms that essentially just was aimed to play at today's internet community, today's American Idol obsessed culture, and aimed at the tweeners, the 16-year-old girls or 15-year-old girls. And I get that essentially that's what the product is for. It is supposed to be a girls' aimed product. I mean, the original line of cartoon, the dolls, were clearly all aimed towards little girls to play with. But I don't think the cartoon ever played down to that concept where it was just that. And I think a lot of guys out there latched onto it as well and started to enjoy it as well over the course of time. And some people, obviously, I also know Gem and the Holograms is big in the gay, lesbian, trans community as well. And I think that latched on to not just those groups, but I think it also latched on to the target audience of girls, the gay, lesbian, trans community. It also reached out to guys like me as well, who just were looking for good story, you know? So I think I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I started the video saying this. I think the movie was actually a pretty good movie, and if it wasn't a Gem and the Holograms movie, it probably would have been pretty decent. Done just as well as any of the other movies in that genre, that musical genre. That being said, as a Gem and the Holograms movie, it kind of blew. It was a bad adaptation of that property. Would I recommend people buy it? I'm a fan. I went to see it in the theaters, which was really weird because it was me and a lady with 3 8-year-old girls. So I'm sure she probably sat in the theater thinking to herself, what the fuck is this 45-year-old dude doing in here seeing a girl flick, you know? A kid's girl flick, too. She probably was ready to call the police and have me fucking hauled out of there for being some sort of fucking pervert or something. But I'm a fan, you know? I went to go see it in the movies. I actually put down my whatever it cost to go and actually saw it. And I did buy the Blu-ray as well. Granted, I waited a few months and waited until I could get it for $5 on eBay. But I did buy it. And I do watch it from time to time. I do enjoy it. I would call myself one of those fans who is probably going to sit through it every once in a while because I am a fan. I don't know that everybody would. I would say that if you rent it or are able to watch it online, streaming, or whatever the deal is, it's not such a horrible movie to watch. I can picture it probably being on Lifetime or something, or the Disney Channel or something along those lines, one of the more family-oriented movie stations or TV stations. I can see it being on there once in a while at some point in time and people watching it. And if you kind of enjoy like a musical, young group trying to get over kind of movie, Step Up, you enjoy any of those movies, you're probably going to enjoy this as well. It's not a horrible film. It's just a bad adaptation of Jem and The Holograms. And so if you get a chance and you do enjoy it, I wouldn't crap on it. I would say it's worth watching at least once just to see. I'm not sure most people would buy it, but certainly it's not nearly as bad as critics made it out to be. It's not nearly as bad as some of the internet community made it out to be. It is enjoyable. It's just not what you'd expect out of a movie based on the cartoon series. And you should know that going in. And that would be my entire review of Jem and the Holograms. So enjoy it if you want, or don't. I don't care, but I did review it, and here you go. Thanks.